The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry has announced the suspension of peace talks with Russia due to a lack of progress. We'll soon tell you what new absurd excuses the Kremlin has come up with this time. Putin is furious. The bunker dictator has once again set a new deadline for the Russian army. He has ordered the capture of the Pokrovsk Myrnohrad Kostiantynivka agglomeration by November 21st of this year. Russia has launched an offensive in a new direction, and the Ukrainian armed forces are being forced to withdraw to more advantageous positions. Is there a threat to the southern front? A new problem for ordinary Russians. Dozens of regional nationalist cells are now openly threatening not only migrants but also their fellow countrymen who embody traditional values. We'll tell and show you everything right now, but in the meantime, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ukraine Today. Russian occupiers are actively assaulting in the Pokrovsk direction, where the Ukrainian armed forces have already repelled more than 50 attacks. The defense forces are working to destroy the enemy firing positions that have been set up in certain districts of Pokrovsk over the past few days. To reduce the risk to soldiers' lives, once the enemy is detected, strike drones are sent against them. At the same time, in Myrnohrad, the enemy continues to put pressure on the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses with constant attacks, but has not been able to enter the city. Logistics for Ukrainian troops is being maintained. In particular, there are reports of enemy plans to attack Myrnohrad from the direction of Hrodivka using armored vehicles. Intense fighting continues in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Ukrainian troops have withdrawn from their positions in the area of Ravnopil. However, the enemy's advance toward Huliapol has been stopped. Efforts to block and comprehensively strike the enemy are ongoing. Putin has once again set a new deadline for the Russian army. He has ordered the capture of the agglomeration Pokrovsk, Myrnohrad and Kostiantynivka by November 21st of this year. And almost simultaneously with this, a new mass mobilization began in Russia. It is being carried out secretly, unofficially. In particular, people are being sent to the front under the pretense of guarding strategic facilities.
In Pokrovsk, the Ukrainian armed forces are eliminating a huge number of occupiers, and in Rodinske, a key settlement that supports the entire Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad agglomeration from the east, Ukrainian tank crews have crushed the Russian invaders to rubble.
Reports like these from the hottest spot in Donbass, Pokrovsk, are coming in almost daily. October has already become the bloodiest month for the Russian group throughout the entire war. However, it seems that November will break even this record. The colossal efforts of the defense forces have resulted in record losses for the Russian Federation and, as a consequence, a new wave of mobilization, so far a covert one.
This term should be understood to mean several things. It refers to the recruitment of conscripts for contracts, as well as the enlistment of reservists to guard important facilities, which the Russians have announced in many regions. This is a sign that the current flow of contract soldiers in Russia has decreased. The recruitment of foreigners also does not compensate for the losses in battle.
The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation claims that Pokrovsk has become the site of incredible Russian losses. According to reports from Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky, in their attempt to occupy this city, more than 30,000 occupiers have already lost their lives. And their number is growing every day.
The fact that Pokrovsk has turned into yet another meat grinder for the Russian occupiers is undeniable. And in general, no one is hiding the fact that the concept, not the strategy, of Ukraine's defense forces is to maximize. The objective is to gradually wear down the enemy's offensive potential as much as possible, to inflict the greatest possible damage so that they ultimately lack the strength to continue and expand their offensive. This is done to ensure that these infiltrations do not turn into breakthroughs of our defenses.
As always, the Kremlin decided to solve the issue through deception, officially not announcing a mobilization, but in reality rounding up literally everyone the security forces and the military can get their hands on.
What characterizes this draft? Hellish raids that ignore all deferments, all supporting documents, basically anything at all. And these hellish raids are happening not only in Moscow, but now also in the regions. There are already reports of raids in Kazan and Khabarovsk. This is alarming, this is bad, because it's one thing if the raids were only in Moscow and Makhachkala, but it's a whole different matter if they're happening in cities with 1 million people. This means that now they're just going to cover the entire territory as much as they can, with police officers who will be rounding up all men of conscription age wherever they can find them.
At the same time, the previous rule that conscripts don't fight at the front is now a thing of the past. Now, the year-round draft that's been announced provides the army with a constant influx of people. First and foremost for recruitment, which, by the way, is now universally forced.
This is the signing of contracts through pressure, let's put it that way, emotional pressure. When conscripts are called up, they end up in the barracks. And their hazing is still very much present in the Russian army. Here, we've already forgotten what that's like. So you have to put pressure on this new recruit and force him to sign a contract that way. And then he is no longer a conscript, he becomes a contract soldier. And as is well known, contract soldiers can be sent under Russian law directly to the front lines.
Russian human rights activists say that the methods in Russia haven't changed, but the scale of such contract signings has increased dramatically. If before these were local initiatives, now the order has come from above, to forcibly keep as many people in the army as possible.
This hidden mobilization is ongoing. It hasn't started just now. I repeat, it never ended. It's been going on since the fall of 2022. It's just a new phase of it now.
Another method invented by the Russian military machine is to call up reservists to guard strategic facilities. Analysts explain that this scheme is designed for the gradual deployment to the front of everyone who has ever been connected to the army in any way. To begin with, these reservists will replace the current convoys, whose fate is already sealed.
In this way, the state can take the contract soldiers who are currently in Region N, send them to the front, and instead regularly rotate reservists in their place. 2 months, 2 months, 2 months. That is, the training camps they will hold for reservists are specifically for guarding these facilities.
And after several rotations, it will be those very reservists who are sent to the front, and if there's time, they'll undergo field military training. If Russian losses do not decrease, the briefing will take place right on the bus on the way to the war. Putin needs an uninterrupted supply of cannon fodder.
The enemy has thrown literally everything they have at Pokrovsk. But they continue to suffer such devastating losses there that even a numerical advantage of up to 20 times in some areas does not allow them to take control of this city.
The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, heard a report from the head of the Foreign Intelligence Service, Ole Ivashchenko. According to the report, for the first time since the beginning of the war, there has been a noticeable decline in the extraction and processing of Russian oil. According to Zelensky, oil and gas revenues in the Russian budget are decreasing, and by the end of this year, Russia will lose at least $37 billion in budget oil and gas income. Quote, and Russian oil companies are losing tens of billions of dollars more. And the energy sector as a whole, the president stated. The head of state noted that all of this limits the Russian war machine. In addition, both regular sanctions against Russia and Ukraine's long-range sanctions are working effectively.
Russians should prepare for exhausting blackouts. Every strike on energy facilities in Ukraine now receives a response against Russian combined heat and power plants, thermal power stations, and other energy facilities of the aggressor country.
More and more Russian cities are plunging into darkness. If Russians attack Ukraine's energy system, Ukraine will attack Russia's. The Ukrainian authorities warned about this, and the defense forces have clearly demonstrated it.
The roof was blown off.
For example, this is what the Voronezh CHP plant looks like now. It was attacked on November 9th. Reports say there were at least 3 hits. After the explosions, part of the city was left without electricity.
Voronezh is quite a significant city. There are many enterprises in Voronezh that serve the Voronezh region, including electronics manufacturers. There are also aviation and military enterprises there.
This is exactly the difference between Russian and Ukrainian strikes on the energy system. In addition to a deserved response, the goal of the Ukrainian defenders is to plunge into darkness the energy infrastructure facilities that support the operation of Russia's defense industry.
The purpose, first of all, is to really show Russia that it's not only them who can do this, we can also respond in kind to certain things. And indeed, to try to stop their powerful machine and to undermine, or rather to systematically weaken the military-industrial complex that is actively working against us in this war, is a significant challenge.
I think this trend will continue. What at first glance seems like pecking away at the liver of the Russian energy system will, in fact, gradually knock out various elements of the infrastructure. At first glance, it might just seem satisfying that somewhere in Belgorod or Voronezh people had to sit without electricity. But let's think about it. In some ways, the configuration of the Russian energy system might be similar to ours, in the sense that the same power lines can supply not only the residential sector, but also, for example, industry and railway transport.
That's why none of these attacks are random. The goal is not just to respond, but to respond painfully so that the facilities supplying power to the military-industrial enterprises of the aggressor country cannot fuel the Kremlin's ambitions.
When various elements of the integrity of the Russian energy system are gradually undermined, it primarily means that somewhere a train carrying something the Rashists need for the war will stop, or there will be scheduled power outages at a factory producing important products for Russia.
And according to experts, not all such enterprises are located deep in the rear. Many facilities are located not far from the Ukrainian border. For example, strategic Tu-95 MS bombers are repaired in Taganrog, and one of the manufacturers of components for the Russian missile program, specifically solid fuel for the Iskanders, is located just 150 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. Plunging them into electrical darkness is quite realistic. There are undoubtedly such important facilities for the Russian military-industrial complex in the Moscow region as well. And for that matter, even in Moscow itself.
I think that the psychological effect when Moscow is plunged into darkness is much more effective than if we just shut down a few factories there, because it's precisely this main mass, what's it called, the office plankton, who live off the regions. Finally, even they will realize that something is happening and that something needs to be done.
In this way, Ukraine will kill not 2 but 3 birds with one stone at once. A just response, paralyzing Russian military-industrial facilities and exerting psychological pressure on the Kremlin, sounds like the perfect goal for the next blackout.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine this year ended without significant progress, so it was decided to suspend them, said Ukrainian Deputy Foreign Minister Serhiy Kyslytsya in an interview with The Times on Tuesday. Following Kyslytsya's interview, the Russian Foreign Ministry announced that the Kremlin is ready to resume negotiations with Ukraine in Turkey, cynically claiming that the peace process was suspended by Kyiv. At the same time, Putin's regime came up with yet another set of excuses to avoid peace talks with Ukraine. In particular, they claim that Ukraine is allegedly being encouraged to continue the war. This was stated by Kremlin Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov for Russian propaganda outlets. Well, basically, it's the same old song to stall sanctions and new military aid to Ukraine while Putin continues his bloody terror against our country. More and more military aid to Ukraine is coming from Poland. Find out right now exactly what will be sent to the front lines in the near future from our neighbors and main partners to successfully repel enemy attacks. More than 120 billion zlotys or $4 billion. That's the impressive amount Poland has spent on aid to Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. This includes both humanitarian and military support. Poland was one of the first countries to supply Ukraine with tanks, ammunition, and defense equipment on a large scale. In 2022 to 2023, it delivered in particular more than 300 tanks, as well as armored personnel carriers, artillery systems, air defense systems, drones, mortars, assault rifles, and over 100 million rounds of ammunition. 10 airplanes and 10 helicopters were also sent to Ukraine. From 2022 to 2024, Poland provided Ukraine with 47 packages of military aid. The value of the equipment supplied in 2022 alone amounted to 7.23 billion zlotys, and in 2023 to 2024, another 5.63 billion. Poland also supplied more than 19,500 Starlink terminals, providing the Ukrainian armed forces with stable satellite communication. This accounted for almost half of all terminals used in Ukraine by the end of 2023. Poland's assistance to Ukraine is not the result of romantic enthusiasm. It's pragmatic. Our neighbors understand that if Ukraine falls, Poland will be next in line. After all, a Ukraine at war gives Europe time to better prepare for threats. This time is needed, and we have no right to waste a single minute. We will be held accountable for every minute. 318 tanks were delivered to Kiev by Warsaw. Among them were modernized T-72s, M1Rs, PT-91s, and Leopard 2S. This is more than anyone else has supplied. The total value of gratuitous aid, including training, logistics, repairs, and medical support, exceeded $4 billion by March of this year. Specifically, in 2022, it amounted to $1.6 billion, and in 2023 to 2024, $1.3 billion. Poland also provided additional support. Military aid to Poland, 586 armored vehicles, 137 artillery systems, 10 Mi-24 helicopters, 10 MiG-29 fighter jets, 287 man-portable air defense systems, 44 air-to-air missiles, over 100 units of small arms, 89 mortars, 4 Grad multiple launch rocket systems, and more than 100 million rounds of ammunition. In addition to gratuitous aid, in just 2022 to 2023, Ukraine purchased from Poland weapons worth more than 2.2 billion euros. The largest contract was a deal for 54 Krab self-propelled howitzers. Of these, 36 have already been delivered. The countries are establishing joint production of weapons and equipment. The parties have agreed on the joint production of 125mm tank ammunition. There are also plans for joint production of other weapons and military equipment, including the establishment of Polish company manufacturing facilities in Ukraine.
The industry needs to be mobilized. Polish and Ukrainian industries should make joint investments, not only during the war, but also to develop their deterrence potential. These initiatives are very much needed. It is also very important for us to improve economic relations. We will continue to support Ukraine.
Poland has become the main hub for supplying weapons to Ukraine. Also during the war, more than 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained on Polish territory. With each year of the war, the assistance and cooperation between Poland and Ukraine only grows stronger. The only Ukrainian satellite, Sich-230, has left orbit. Its mission ended as scheduled. But in return, the Czechs have promised to give us a new satellite. Our journalists looked into what it will be capable of and what prospects Ukraine has for its own satellites. A satellite for Ukraine, October 21st, 2020. On this day, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic announced that as a sign of support for Ukraine, it would gift it an Earth observation satellite. This information appeared in October, when the last operational Ukrainian satellite finished its mission.
The Sich-230 satellite, which is an advanced satellite, is now in orbit.
Satellite data for Ukraine.
Sich-230 fell and most likely burned up in the atmosphere on October 8th off the coast of Alaska, USA. This was reported by the National Center for Space Facilities Control and Testing. Now it needs a replacement.
Let's not forget that Ukraine also has access to Finnish satellites, which were also provided to them. These satellites were practically gifted to Ukraine, and Ukraine can also make use of Finnish satellites for its own purposes. But let's also not forget about the Starlink equipment systems and the continued access to critical data from the satellites of Ukraine's partners, primarily, of course, the United States.
Which specific satellite the Czech Republic will give to Ukraine is still unknown. The previous one was launched into its designated orbit by a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket on January 13, 2022. After that, contact was established with it, and it was confirmed that the onboard equipment was functioning properly. At that time, the President's office stated that the digital images transmitted by the satellite to Earth could be used in agriculture and forestry, cartography for water resource management, monitoring emergencies and natural disasters, as well as in security and defense for detecting illegal activities.
Satellites play several important roles and perform several key tasks. In wartime conditions, the primary role, of course, is reconnaissance. Communication on the battlefield is also extremely important. And in fact, the fact that Ukraine was the first to have Starlink systems gave it a significant advantage at the beginning of the full-scale invasion.
Even though the Russians have now brought their satellite industry to decline in their own country, it was previously at a high level and is now helping the Kremlin wage war against our country.
Russia is also using data from Chinese satellites. This means that Russia's own satellite constellation in orbit is currently not sufficient to meet its needs, and as a result, it is also forced to make use of Chinese satellites as well.
We can say that the Ukrainian satellite industry is now at the stage of its inception. With the support of its allies, it has every chance to become promising and competitive in the world.
A new problem for ordinary Russians. Northern Man, Russian community, Rusik, dozens of regional cells, nationalists In recent years, the Russian community has become one of the most prominent far-right organizations. These groups are extremely dangerous not only for migrants, but also for traditional Russians. Details coming up right now as you watch the report. By the way, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ukraine Today. Friends, I apologize, but we're experiencing some minor technical difficulties. Please understand and forgive us. The topic is very interesting and we will definitely return to it in tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching our episode. And once again, let me remind you not to forget to like our episode. All the best.